She delivered a package to a billionaire's mansion and found her father's past hanging on the wall. A secret powerful enough to destroy an empire. Lena Carter, 23, had delivered enough packages to know the difference between a door and a border. Most addresses were doors, paper-thin thresholds that opened and closed with the rhythm of ordinary life. Porches, apartments, office lobbies that smelled like cheap coffee and hurried apologies. But Bellwood Hills wasn't a door. It was a border, a place where the air seemed quieter because money had paid the world to lower its voice. At 5:12 a.m., Lena woke to the rasp of her father's cough through the wall. It wasn't loud. It was worse than loud, tight, controlled, the sound of a man trying not to make his sickness anyone else's problem. Daniel Carter was 53, but the last year had put extra winters in his shoulders. He worked nights as a hospital custodian at County General, the kind of job where you cleaned up everyone's disasters and were thanked by nobody but the floor. He had raised Lena alone since she could remember, with a gentleness that never begged for sympathy and a pride that never asked for help. "Dad," she whispered at his doorway. Daniel sat upright in the dim light, one hand braced on his chest, the other turning the pages of an old paperback he'd been reading for weeks. When he looked up, he smiled like the cough hadn't happened. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." He waved her off with the same practiced grace he used on pain. "I'll rest after you leave," Lena wanted to argue. But she'd learned something living with her father. Some people hold their dignity the way others hold a weapon, tight, close, and never handed over. She kissed his forehead. His skin was warm, too warm. She tucked the blanket higher around his legs, then walked into her small kitchen where the sink dripped like it was counting debts. Her phone buzzed with a shift notification from Quick Drop Logistics. Executive-only delivery. Triple rate. Must be delivered inside property. Lena stared at the words until they felt like they were staring back. Inside property meant security gates, private staff, rooms that didn't know what rent was. Her first instinct was to decline. Rich people didn't invite strangers into their homes for no reason. But then she pictured the prescription bottle on the counter, the one her father pretended he didn't need, the one she refilled only when she could. Triple rate could cover it. By 6:30, Lena was in her uniform. Navy jacket, scuffed sneakers, hair pulled back in a tight knot, driving the company's battered quick-drop van through the sleeping city. The sky was still bruised with night. Street lights smeared gold across wet asphalt. She passed diners turning on their neon signs, construction crews drinking their first coffees, and commuters moving like they were already late to lives they didn't love. Bellwood Hills rose out of the city like a private planet. The streets widened, the trees grew taller, the houses stopped being houses and became statements. Gates appeared like metal jaws. Cameras rotated with the calm confidence of beings that never blink. At Willowcrest Lane, Lena pressed the intercom. "Quick drop delivery," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. A pause, the kind of pause that made you feel measured. Then, "Proceed to the main house. Do not deviate." The gates opened without a sound. The driveway curved through gardens manicured into obedience. The mansion emerged slowly, brick and glass and columns, a shape that belonged more to history than to people. Lena parked near the front steps, suddenly aware of her own smallness, her jacket, her hands, her life. A security man met her at the door, polite, cold. "Ms. Whitlock requested personal delivery," he said. "Follow me. No wandering." Lena's handheld scanner chimed once, an odd locking tone. Her root screen, which normally allowed reassignments, showed a new line stamped in grey. Assignment locked. Client requested. Carter. Her stomach tightened. She told herself it was coincidence. Algorithms made strange decisions all the time. Inside, the air was cooler than outside, and it smelled like wood polish and old money. Marble floors swallowed the sound of her footsteps. The hallway was lined with paintings, stern faces, landscapes, abstract art that looked like it was trying to be important. Then they reached a room filled with sunlight. The conservatory. Glass walls rose to the ceiling. Plants sat in ceramic pots that probably cost more than Lena's van. The furniture was pale, clean, untouched by ordinary bodies. And at the center of the room stood an easel, a portrait. Lena's fingers tightened around the package handle. As the world narrowed until it was only paint and light. A man in the portrait, black, mid-30s, strong jaw, thoughtful eyes, sat in a garden as if he belonged to it. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled, forearms dusted with sunlight. But it wasn't the elegance that shattered her. It was the ring, a simple silver band on his right hand. Lena had seen that ring her entire life. Daniel wore it on a chain under his shirt, never on his finger. He never explained why. When Lena was younger, she once asked, and he'd said only, "Some things aren't jewelry. They're promises." Her knees went weak. The package slipped from her grip and hit the marble with a dull, unforgiving sound. The security man's hand moved, instinctive, toward the box. Somewhere behind Lena, a voice spoke, female, controlled, but carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to raise itself. "Leave it." The guard froze, then lifted the package and placed it back into Lena's hands without warmth, as if the object itself had become dangerous. "Is there a problem?" the voice asked. Lena turned. An older white woman stood near the window, her hair perfectly silver, her posture straight as a verdict. She looked like she'd spent a lifetime being obeyed. Evelyn Whitlock. Lena's throat closed around her breath. Her hands were shaking, but she lifted one and pointed at the portrait like a child accusing a ghost. "That's my father," she said, and her voice cracked anyway. "Why is my dad's picture in your house?" Evelyn's face drained of color so fast it looked like someone had pulled the life out of her with a hook. For a moment, the entire mansion seemed to hold its breath. And Lena understood, with a sudden, terrifying clarity. This delivery was never meant to be ordinary. Lena didn't remember the drive back. Not really. She remembered fragments, the iron gates closing behind her like a mouth swallowing its secret, the sun flashing off perfect windows, the security guard's eyes following her all the way to the van, as if she'd just walked out carrying something priceless. Maybe she had. Maybe the most valuable thing in that mansion was not the marble or the art or the glass walls that held sunlight like captive water. Maybe it was the truth. Her phone buzzed twice. Quick drop notifications. A supervisor's message. She didn't open any of them. The package sat in the back of the van, untouched. As if completing the job would make this real in a way she couldn't survive. At a red light, she looked down at her hands and realized they were still trembling. Not from fear of Evelyn Whitlock. From fear of what her father might do when she came home with a question he'd spent 20 years starving. The apartment building greeted her the way it always did. A hallway that smelled like old cooking oil and damp plaster, fluorescent lights that flickered like tired eyelids, a staircase that creaked under secrets. She moved quietly, but the moment she opened the door, she heard it again. Daniel's cough. This time it wasn't contained. It tore through him in rough bursts, scraping the air as if his lungs were made of paper. "Dad!" Lena called, voice too sharp. "In here?" Daniel answered, and the words were calm enough to be a lie. She found him in the small living room, sitting upright on the couch with a blanket over his legs, a mug of tea untouched in his hands. The TV was off. The room was dim. In the half-light, his face looked thinner than yesterday. He turned to her, and the practiced smile rose automatically. "You're back early," he said. "Everything okay?" Lena stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Not just Daniel Carter, hospital custodian, quiet father, man who ironed his own shirt collars and never missed a rent payment if he could help it, but Daniel Carter, the man whose portrait sat in a billionaire's conservatory like a monument. "I need you to look at something," she said. Daniel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of instinct. He didn't ask what. He didn't ask where she'd been. He only said, "What happened?" Lena had taken a photo quickly, so quickly she'd barely had time to frame it. Sunlight on glass, the easel, the man's face, her father's face. She opened the photo and held it out. The moment Daniel saw the screen, the mug slipped from his hands. It didn't shatter, just tipped, spilling tea across the worn carpet in a dark stain that spread like bad news. Daniel didn't move to clean it. He didn't even blink. He stared at the portrait as if it had reached through the screen and grabbed him by the throat. All color drained from his face. The blanket on his legs trembled with him. "Where did you get that?" Daniel whispered, not angry, not accusing, terrified. "In Bellwood Hills," Lena said. "In Evelyn Whitlock's house." His eyes snapped up at the name, and the way he flinched, small, involuntary, was louder than any confession. "You know her," Lena said, voice breaking. "Dad, you know her." Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked down at his hands as if he didn't recognize them anymore. Then he rose too fast, swaying, one palm braced against the wall. "Lena," he said, and the way he said her name was like a plea. "You can't go back there." "Why?" she demanded. "Why is your portrait in her mansion? Why is your ring in that painting? Why have you never—" "Because it's not just a portrait," Daniel cut in, sharper than she'd ever heard him. The sound startled them both. He swallowed, forced his voice lower, but the steel remained. "It's a door." Lena felt cold bloom up her arms. "A door to what?" Daniel closed his eyes as if trying to breathe through water. "To a life that doesn't end cleanly," he said. "To people who don't lose with dignity. To a world where your name becomes a weapon." Lena's hands clenched. "Dad, I'm not a child." "I know," Daniel said softly. "That's what scares me." She thrust the phone forward again, as if the image itself could demand an answer. "This is you. And she... When I said your name, she looked like she'd been stabbed. She knew exactly who you were." Daniel stared at the screen again, and this time his expression changed. Not fear. Mourning. "That ring," Lena whispered. "You always hide it. Why?" Daniel's fingers went to his chest, under his shirt, where the chain lay. He didn't pull it out. He just held it there, like holding his own heart in place. "Some promises," he said, voice hoarse, or were never meant to survive the world that made them. Lena's eyes burned. Was she part of that promise? She asked. Daniel's silence was answer enough. You lied, Lena said, and she hated how much it hurt. My whole life. You lied. Daniel flinched, but he didn't defend himself. I didn't lie to hurt you, he said. I hid it to keep you alive. Alive from what? Daniel looked toward the window, as if expecting a car idling outside, a shadow watching, a memory returning in human form. In that world, he said, they don't just take your money. They take your choices, your privacy, your peace. They take your name and turn it into a headline. They take your love and turn it into leverage. A knock sounded in the hallway, some neighbor, some harmless sound, but Daniel stiffened like a hunted thing. Lena saw it. Yeah, and once you see fear in someone you love, you can never unsee it. Tell me one thing, Lena said, softer. Just one. Daniel's eyes searched hers, pleading for the version of her that still believed in silence. But she didn't look away. Was I the reason you ran? She asked. Or was she? Daniel closed his eyes. His throat worked like he was swallowing glass. When he opened them again, his gaze was a confession without words. Lena's breath hitched. Because if Evelyn Whitlock had kept his portrait like a relic, then whatever existed between them wasn't small. It was the kind of thing people ruin lives for. Lena backed away slowly, her mind racing. I'm going to work, she said, though she wasn't sure she could. Daniel reached for her wrist. Please, he whispered, don't do this. Lena looked down at his hand, calloused, trembling, the hand that had packed her lunches, fixed her shoes, cleaned up her childhood spills without ever making her feel like a burden. She gently pulled free. I love you, she said, voice breaking. But I need the truth. Daniel's shoulders sagged, as if the word truth weighed more than any mop bucket he'd ever dragged. Lena walked out, down the stairs, into the morning. And she didn't see the way Daniel stood in the doorway after she left, one hand pressed to his chest, not because of the cough, but because some past he had buried had just started to breathe again. Quick Drop's distribution center buzzed with its usual rhythm, scanners chirping, metal carts rattling, supervisors shouting routes over the hum of engines. But when Lena walked in, something shifted. Conversations dipped. A few drivers glanced at her, then looked away too quickly. Ray, the stocky floor supervisor with a permanent crease between his brows, called her over. Carter, he said, tapping his tablet. About that executive delivery? Lena stiffened. Yeah? He hesitated. Not suspicious, just tired. They flagged it as incomplete. Client requested confirmation you delivered inside. Said you left early. Lena's mouth went dry. Something happened, she said quietly. Ray lowered his voice. Bellwood Hills clients don't like surprises, and they don't let things go. Her phone buzzed on her hip. Unknown number. She answered. Ms. Carter, a calm male voice said. My name is Victor Hale. I represent Ms. Evelyn Whitlock. Lena's fingers tightened around the scanner in her hand. What does she want? Lena asked, forcing steadiness. To speak with you, Victor said, and privately. Ms. Whitlock also became aware of Mr. Daniel Carter's health concerns. She is prepared to arrange a medical consultation. No press, no publicity, fully discreet. The word discreet sounded expensive. Why would she do that? Lena asked. A pause, carefully measured. Because she recognizes your father, Victor said, and because she believes what happened yesterday should not end with silence. Lena swallowed. If I meet her, is this going to be about money? She asked. It will be about truth, Victor replied, and about keeping certain people from turning you into a headline before you even understand the story. Victor gave her an address and a time, 3 days later, at a private clinic affiliated with Whitlock Foundation outside the city. Lena hung up and stood still, the warehouse noise blurring into a dull roar. Oh, 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to open the door her father feared. That night, Daniel coughed until the air in the apartment felt thin. He tried to laugh it off in the morning, like always. But Lena caught his eyes in the mirror, hollow, stubborn, and she understood. Some pride is a blessing. Some pride is a slow kind of suicide. 3 days later, the clinic smelled nothing like a hospital. No harsh disinfectant, no fluorescent glare. Just soft light, quiet floors, and the kind of calm that only exists when money pays for it. Daniel came because his cough had gotten worse, and because Lena looked at him with a kind of resolve that made arguments feel small. Victor met them in the lobby, mid-40s, precise suit, eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Carter," he said respectfully, as if greeting someone with a past that carried weight. Daniel's jaw tightened. They were guided into a private exam room. A physician spoke gently, asked questions, listened to Daniel's lungs with a seriousness that felt like dignity. Near the end, the doctor offered simple cheek swabs for a broader genetic panel and to tailor treatment, and asked for one from Daniel and one from Lena. Lena blinked. From me? The doctor's tone stayed clinical. Sometimes a close relative helps us interpret certain markers. It's voluntary. Daniel's eyes flicked to Lena. Lena understood in a flash. This wasn't only medicine, it was proof. Daniel hesitated. Then, like a man stepping into fire because the smoke had already reached his child, he nodded. Afterward, Victor led Lena alone down a quiet hallway to a glass-walled office. Evelyn Whitlock was already there, not in a power suit today, a cream sweater, sleeves pushed up, silver hair looser. But her posture still carried command, the kind that didn't need uniforms. On the glass table lay a thick cream folder sealed with a thin silver strip. "The results came back this morning," Evelyn said softly. "I didn't want to give you anything without certainty." Lena stared at the folder like it could bite. "What is it?" she asked, though her body already knew. Evelyn slid it closer. "Evidence," she said. Lena broke the seal with trembling hands. Inside were documents, lab seals, signatures, chain of custody forms, and a page marked clearly, maternal relationship. Probability, 99.97%. Lena's breath left her like someone had opened a door inside her chest. Her eyes scanned the lines beneath. Reference sample on file, verified identity, matched to Lena Carter. The world narrowed. Lena read it again, slower, as if misreading could save her. Her voice came out thin. "This isn't about my father," she whispered. Evelyn didn't look away. "No," she said. "It's about you." Lena stood too fast, chair scraping. "You don't get to rewrite my life," she said, voice trembling. You don't get to walk in with a test result and decide who I am. Evelyn absorbed the anger like she had earned it. I'm not asking you to accept anything today, she said. I'm asking you to understand why Daniel disappeared. Lena's eyes burned. You told him to leave, Lena said suddenly, as if her bones already knew the answer. Evelyn's gaze faltered, just enough to be human. Yes, she admitted. I believe distance would make you safe. Safe from what? Lena asked. Evelyn's voice lowered. From being used, she said. In my world, family is not only love, it's leverage, and the people who hated Daniel would have used you to punish him. Lena shook her head. So, you kept me in the dark. I kept you alive, Evelyn said, and the words were not defense, just grief. Lena's hands tightened around the folder. I need to talk to him, she said. Evelyn nodded once. Of course. Lena turned toward the door, then paused, eyes flicking, unwanted, back to the conservatory in her mind. One thing, Lena said. Why keep his portrait? Evelyn's throat moved, like the truth was a hard swallow. Because losing him taught me something I hated, she said quietly. Success without truth is just a prettier form of failure. Lena walked out, feeling hollow and sharp at the same time. Outside, the sky had thickened with clouds. Not a storm yet, but the air was changing. When Lena got home, Daniel was waiting by the window like he'd been there the entire time, holding himself together with sheer will. You went, he said. It wasn't a question. Lena placed the folder on the table. I need you to tell me the truth, she said quietly. Daniel's gaze dropped to the documents, and something broke behind his eyes, a mixture of fear, regret, and a kind of exhausted relief. She's my mother, Lena said. Daniel sank into a chair as if gravity finally claimed him. I was going to tell you, he whispered. When? Lena asked, voice cracking. After you were gone? Daniel's hands shook. I didn't know how, he said. Every version of the truth felt like it would take something from you. It already did, Lena replied. Daniel reached under his shirt and pulled the chain free. The silver ring slid into view, dull, faithful, heavy with years. I met Evelyn when I was 30, he began. Not as a custodian. I was inside that world. Advisory work, systems audits, the kind of invisible labor that keeps empires from collapsing. He swallowed. She wasn't like the headlines, he said. She listened. She wanted to change things. And I loved her. Lena's throat tightened. But love inside a machine like Whitlock Industries doesn't stay love, Daniel continued. It becomes vulnerability. People started targeting me, legal threats, rumors, anonymous calls. Lena's eyes lifted. Anonymous calls? Daniel's jaw flexed. A few. Years ago. Always silence, always like somebody breathing on the line just to remind me they could. He looked at the ring. Then she found out you existed, he said, voice almost breaking. And she told me to run because she was right. If they knew about you, they'd use you. Lena's chest hurt. So you disappeared, she whispered. Daniel nodded. I traded a life with light for a life small enough to hide you in, he said. I thought I could keep paying the cost as long as you never got dragged into it. Lena stared at him. And now? She asked. Daniel's voice went quiet. Now the world has noticed, he said, And once it does, it doesn't unsee you. As if the air wanted to prove him right, Lena's phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered, pulse climbing. A low male voice, unfamiliar, controlled. Ms. Carter, it said, you don't know me, but you should be careful about where you go next. Who is this? Lena demanded. A soft laugh, like a blade, slid back into its sheath. Someone who understands what happens to people who get too close to Whitlock Industries. The line went dead. Daniel's grip tightened on the table. See, he whispered. The moment you step into that world, it notices. Lena swallowed fear like medicine, because hiding was gone. And what replaced it was choice. The next morning, the gates of Bellwood Hills looked less like protection and more like a stage. Reporters had gathered outside Whitlock Estate before sunrise. Cameras, microphones, hungry eyes. Someone had leaked the story with surgical timing. It didn't feel like gossip, it felt like strategy. The machine had begun to feed. As Evelyn met Lena at the front steps, calm but not careless. They're going to turn you into a headline, Evelyn said quietly. Speak only if you choose. Lena stepped forward anyway. Flashes fired. Questions sharpened. Is Evelyn Whitlock your mother? Are you the secret heir? Did Whitlock Industries hide you? My name is Lena Carter, Lena said, voice steady. And I didn't come here for headlines. I came here for answers. I'm not interested in anyone's fortune. I'm a person who deserves the truth about her own life. The words didn't stop the cameras, but they shifted the story. For the first time, Lena wasn't being spoken about. She was speaking. Inside Evelyn's car, the noise faded into glassy silence. Evelyn looked at Lena with something like respect. You handled that well, she said. I didn't say much, Lena replied. Sometimes, Evelyn said softly, saying only what matters is the strongest thing you can do. The car headed downtown, Whitlock Industries. The headquarters towered over the city like a polished warning. Inside, employees paused as Lena walked beside Evelyn. Whispers followed like smoke. In Evelyn's top-floor office, an assistant arrived, pale-faced. Board meeting in 20 minutes, she said. Marcus called it. Marcus Whitlock, Evelyn's eldest son, had built his authority on two things: control and timing. He would not waste either. Evelyn's gaze hardened. Let them gather. Lena felt her stomach tighten. What are they going to do? She asked. They'll call you a risk, Evelyn said, and they'll call me compromised. Lena exhaled slowly. If they can erase me for optics, she said quietly, they can erase anyone like my father. Evelyn studied her, really studied her, then nodded once. Then we walk in together, Evelyn said. The boardroom doors were taller than Lena expected. Dark wood, polished to a mirror shine, reflecting a version of herself she barely recognized. Straight posture, steady eyes, a quiet determination she hadn't needed before. Evelyn paused beside her. Once we walk in, she said, they won't see you as a person first. They'll see influence, risk, possibility. Lena nodded. I've been underestimated my whole life, she replied. I can survive being misunderstood for an hour. The doors opened. Conversation stopped. Executives sat in quiet rows of power. At the far end, Marcus Whitlock leaned back with visible skepticism, his gaze sliding over Lena like she was a variable he wanted to eliminate. With respect, Marcus said, we need to address the obvious issue. He didn't point. He didn't need to. Public exposure has increased scrutiny, he continued. Investors are asking whether personal matters are influencing corporate decisions. Evelyn's face remained calm. My personal life does not compromise my leadership, she said evenly. Marcus tilted his head. That remains to be seen. Lena felt the old instinct to shrink. She refused it. You're worried I'll change something here, she said quietly. Several executives looked surprised she spoke. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm worried about stability, he replied, and optics. Optics, Lena repeated softly. That's interesting. She looked around the room. I didn't ask to be part of this company, she said. I asked to understand my own life. The headlines weren't my idea. Marcus leaned forward. And yet here you are, he said, standing beside the CEO while our share price fluctuates. Lena held his gaze. My presence didn't create instability, she said. It revealed instability that was already there. Silence just kept it invisible. The room shifted, subtle, like chairs becoming less comfortable. The meeting continued. Financial charts, legal briefings, strategic defenses. At the end, as people filed out, Marcus lingered. He looked at Lena with the calm of someone who preferred winning quietly. You speak well, he said. But speaking and surviving are different things. I've survived worse than boardrooms, Lena replied. A shadow of a smile. Remember, Marcus said, this world doesn't forgive uncertainty. Then he left. Minutes later, Evelyn's assistant returned, pale again. Ms. Whitlock, she said. Marcus filed a formal challenge. He's alleging emotional impairment and requesting temporary oversight. Lena's chest tightened. He's trying to remove you. Evelyn's eyes went cold, not shocked, not broken. Not remove, she said. Control. The assistant added, quieter. The press already has it. Phones began ringing beyond the office walls. Voices rose. The machine was feeding again. Evelyn turned to Lena. You can still walk away, she said. I can protect you privately. Lena thought of Daniel's cough, the anonymous call, the portrait, the years of silence that had shaped her without consent. She shook her head. No, she said. Oh, if they're fighting you because of me, then I'm not leaving now. Evelyn held her gaze. Then we stand together, she said. A week later, the courthouse steps were louder than any boardroom. Cameras clicked like falling rain. Reporters leaned over metal barriers, hungry for a clean narrative. Lena walked out beside Evelyn Whitlock and Daniel Carter for the first time, visible in daylight as part of the story he'd tried to bury. Daniel looked tired, still coughing, but he stood upright the way he always did, dignity like a spine. Evelyn leaned slightly toward Lena. Whatever happens today, she said softly, you don't owe this world a performance, just honesty. Daniel squeezed Lena's shoulder. Remember who you were before all of this, he murmured. That's still you. Inside the courtroom, our language tried to turn human lives into corporate risk, fiduciary responsibility, governance, impairment. Marcus's attorney argued that Evelyn's decisions were compromised by personal history, that acknowledging Lena publicly destabilized investors, that emotion replaced strategy. It sounded clean, it sounded logical, it sounded like the kind of lie that wears a suit. When Lena was called to the stand, her heartbeat was a drum in her ears. Ms. Carter, Evelyn's attorney asked gently, why did you step into this public situation? Lena inhaled. Because hiding didn't protect anyone, she said. Not my father, not Ms. Whitlock, not me. Marcus's attorney stood for cross-examination. Isn't it true your presence caused instability for Whitlock Industries? Lena met his gaze. My presence revealed instability that already existed, she said. Silence just kept it invisible. The attorney pressed. You stand to benefit financially. Does that influence your choices? Lena shook her head. I grew up believing survival meant staying quiet, she said. Money doesn't change who raised me or what I believe in. I'm not here to inherit an empire. I'm here because family shouldn't be erased to protect reputations. The courtroom held its breath. Hours later, the judge dismissed Marcus's challenge. Evelyn's leadership remained. The attempt to weaponize Lena's existence failed. Outside, headlines churned. Inside, Lena exhaled. It wasn't victory she felt. It was closure. Weeks passed. The storm softened. The media moved on. Markets stabilized. The world found newer scandals to consume. But Lena's life didn't return to what it had been. She began working with the Whitlock Foundation, not as a trophy, not as a headline, just as someone who knew what it meant to count debts by the drip of a sink, to measure love in medication refills and late-night coughs. One afternoon, she stood in the conservatory again. The portrait of Daniel Carter, once kept like a secret, had been carefully removed and archived, destined for a museum collection under full disclosure. Not a relic anymore. A truth. The empty easel didn't look like loss. It looked like space. Daniel entered quietly behind her. You look different here, he said. Maybe I'm finally standing somewhere that doesn't feel borrowed, Lena replied. Evelyn joined them a moment later, slower than before but smiling more easily. Family dinner tonight? She asked. Daniel let out a soft laugh. As long as you're not cooking. Evelyn rolled her eyes. I learned my lesson. They stood together in warm light. 3 lives once separated by fear, now connected by choice. Lena realized then that legacy wasn't the mansion, or the company, or the headlines. Legacy was what you refused to repeat. It was turning power into protection instead of leverage. Later that night, in her new apartment, Lena hung her old quick-drop jacket inside the closet. Not as a reminder of struggle, as proof. Proof that every beginning carries the seed of something larger. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Proud of you, always. Lena smiled and set the phone aside. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life, cars moving, lights changing. Strangers passing each other without knowing how many stories were unfolding at once. Inside, Lena finally felt still, because the question that started everything, why is my father's past hanging on a billionaire's wall, had not led her to fortune, not to fame, but to a truth strong enough to rebuild a family, and a legacy she chose for herself.